Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today on the channel we'll be learning how to make this stunning handkerchief bustier gown with shirt yoke. So this is what it looks like at the back, and it has puff sleeves, it has collars. If this is something you're interested in, you want to keep watching. If you're yet to subscribe to the channel, do well to subscribe. Also give this video a thumbs up. So I'll be showing you how to draft, cut and sew this piece together to achieve the gown that we have here. So let's dive right into the tutorial. Firstly, I've gone ahead to draft out my basic line, and then from the center front I came in by 1.5 inches. I marked it down. I've gone ahead to mark my basic line, the shoulder to the bust point, shoulder to the underbust, the shoulder to the half length. Now you want to add 1 inch to your half length because you'll be joining to the down part. Okay, the next, go ahead and mark half of your shoulder measurement, a neck width of 3 inches. Come down at the shoulder point by 1 inch and connect it for your shoulder slant. The next, you mark your armhole depth, which is gotten by dividing the round bust by 6 and adding 1.5 inch to that. You're going to make a vertical and horizontal line at that point. Now for the neck depth, since the upper part, the yoke here is a shirt, we're going to use 2.5 for the front neck depth and go ahead to connect it just like I've done there. Now the next thing is to get our armhole curve. So you get that by getting the midpoint of the measurement you have around the armhole depth line, come in by 1/2 inch at that point, and then mark quarter of the round bust measurement. So make sure you're marking this correctly so that everything turns out looking nice by the time you finish. The next is to go in with your curve rule, your armhole curve rule, and then connect the points together. So this is it. Now the next thing you want to determine is the yoke, the length for the yoke you want. Now I'm going to use this point where I have the midpoint for the armhole. That's what I'm going to use as my yoke extension. So that's where my yoke is going to sit from. You can measure and then determine that. Okay, so you can see that I took the measurement from the other side and also measure here so that I have it on a straight line, and I just connected that. So that is just our yoke right there. We have that settled down. Now, depending on the kind of yoke you want to create, you can create a sweetheart neckline yoke, just like what I did with my freehand there, if that is what you want to achieve. But we're going to just leave this straight because we're following what we have exactly. Next thing you want to do is to go ahead and place your bust pan. So the bust pan is the distance from one nipple to the other. You're going to divide that by 2 and place it down. Okay, since our paper, we just have one piece of this. Now the next thing we'll do is to connect this line which we have marked to the midpoint of the armhole, which we have right there. You can see me extending that right there. So use the curved part of your rule to connect that line, and make sure that you don't have any pointy edge at that point, so you can see me touching up the lines. Next is the dart intake. So I'm going to use 2.5 inches for my dart intake. I'll be giving 1 inch to the inner part, which is the part going towards the center front, and then 1.5 inches to the part going towards the side. So you mark that from the under bust down to the waist length and then connect together. Now from the bust point, I'm coming down 1/2 inch, and then I'll use my curve rule to make the connection to give me the curve for the bust area. So this is the dart intake we'll be using for this piece. Now to get your dart intake, you have to do that depending on your bust, okay, your bust circumference, right? So the person I'm making this gown for, she's of a bust of 40 inches, that's why. Now from the armhole, midpoint of the armhole, I came down 1 inch, and then I'm going to make an extension also to come down to the bust line. So because I don't want to have shortage on while stitching both pieces together, I'm going to extend that line I just came down by 1 inch. I'll extend it by 1 inch also, so that it matches what I have at the upper part. So while connecting this line, make sure that it's in the same direction with the one you have at the upper line, so that when you stitch them together, it's going to work. Now we're going to go over and place our horizontal measurement. Remember, we have the quarter of the round bust. We're going to now indicate that we have there at the armhole area, which is 1 inch, and then your seam allowance. I'm using a seam allowance of 2 inches for this. I just marked that down, and then I adjusted the armhole which I have there. I'll go over to the waist, and then I'll mark quarter of my round waist measurement, the dart intake of 2.5, and then a seam allowance of 2 inches. Like I said, make sure that what you're taking at the upper part is what you're taking at the lower part. You need both of them to be matching. Your seam allowances should be matching, okay? So this is what we have now for it. This is what it looks like. Now we want to make a side dart. So for the side dart, it's usually the difference between the shoulder to waist at the front and the shoulder to waist at the back. I always say that. So for this client, the difference is 1.5 inches. So from the bust point, I came down 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to connect it to my center line right here for the dart line. I'm going to connect it there. It means that we're going to be taking off this part here. So what I'm going to do now is to extend the yoke line. And this is, remember, this is our yoke. This is the center front, and the other one is the side front. So we're going to now extend the yoke this way so that we know what we're doing. So this is the yoke part of this. I'll go ahead and cut it down. So take note of your shoulder to waist at the back, because that's what the measurement will be using exactly at the back. Okay, so I'm going ahead to just take off the parts I will not be using, cutting out my patterns so that I can go ahead to draft out the back. So you want to watch closely how I'm doing this so that you get the hang of it. So for this dart here, you are going to split it open and then close it back. Now you notice some differences that is not equal. Go ahead and make adjustments to that point. Now moving over to the back, I've also marked out my horizontal lines. I've also marked out my vertical lines, sorry. And then for the zip area, I marked 2 inches inwards. We're going to work on that. Now, because we're using the exact measurement of the shoulder to waist, the shoulder to waist, it's going to be reduced. Now, actually, the shoulder to waist in front is 17. The shoulder to waist at the back is 15.5. So you want to indicate that while you're doing for the back, okay, so that it matches with the length. Don't use the exact 17 you used in front. Don't use it at the back. So I went ahead to mark my shoulder measurement. Came down 1 inch at that point. The same neck width I used in front, which was 3 inches. And then I use a neck depth of 1 inches for the back. Remember, it's a shirt. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Go ahead and mark your armhole depth line, make a horizontal line, make a vertical line at that point, get the midpoint of that line. Now for the back armhole, we don't come in by 1/2 inch. It's usually different from that of the front. So just go ahead and place your bust point, your round bust measurement, your seam allowance in this case, and then connect. So I'm going to extend this chest line coming towards the center area here. I'm going to tell you why we're doing that. Now for the yoke of the back, we're going to be creating something totally different. You notice from the intro video, it has like a V shape at the back. You can do whatever you want to. So from the bust point line, what I did was to come up by 1 inch. So you can take it lower depending on the kind of style you want to create on yours. And then go ahead and place your dart. So make sure you're using the same dart point you used, that the bust span measurement you used for the front. Go ahead and do that. Now for the dart intake for the back piece, I'll be using 0.75 inches. I'm going to take that on both sides of my dart leg around the waist, and then I will connect it to nothing at the upper part. So make sure that it matches, and then connect it to the upper part, which is the bust area. Now, if you want your piece, okay, we've gone ahead to get the chest line measurement, which is the bust measurement. So the next thing we're going to do is to place the round waist measurement, take the dart intake we have around there, and then the seam allowance, which is 2 inches like we used for the front, and go ahead and connect it together. So I'm going to bring in the front side pattern and place them together. You see that they are matching. Now, the reason I'm saying do not use the exact measurements, the exact shoulder to waist measurement you used at the front, do not use it at the back, so that the back will not be longer. Remember, we're already taking 1.5 inches from the sides of the front for that side dart. I hope you get the understanding of what I'm trying to explain. Now, from the center of my waist, I went in by 1/2 inch, and I'll connect it to nothing. Now we're moving over to the zipper side to make adjustments. So for the zip of this, we'll be using 1.5 inches. I'm just going to mark 1.5 inches all through this for my zipper allowance, and go ahead and connect those lines together to achieve that. So this is actually quite easy. It's just the yoke if you don't know how to do that. So you know how to do that already. So because we've added the zip allowance, we're going to now adjust the yoke for the back. You notice that what we have here isn't getting to that zip allowance line. So we're going to adjust that to get to that. Now also, we're going to just adjust that. So just go ahead with your rule and adjust that line so that it gets to the zip allowance line. That's just simply what you need to do. Now also, if you want to do an armhole dart for the back, you can also do that. Okay, you just need to extend what you have from the chest line, the bust point line, you extend that towards the midpoint of your armhole, and that's just it. So this is what I'm just explaining. So if you want it to get to that point, see me using my curve rule to just connect that if you want that part to be separated. But I'm going to leave that as a whole piece. So this is what we have for the back. We have the yoke and we have that part, and this is what we have for the front. So go ahead and cut on our pattern and start stitching these pieces down together. So this is what I have after cutting. This is the front. I added half of an inch to the upper part. As you can see, I added half of an inch to the part my dart will sit, half of an inch to the waist. I basically added allowances to everywhere apart from the sides, the armhole, and then the center front. Okay. So for the upper part, which is the yoke part, you can see the shirt piece. I also added half of an inch around the midpoint, the down part, the neckline, the shoulder areas. Now I've gone ahead to iron my interfacing on my main piece, on my lining pieces, and then I ironed my wadding to the main piece of fabric. So what I'm going to start doing is to stitch my piece together. So you're going to place them right side to right side and go ahead and stitch. So make sure to notch your underbust areas. It's important that the underbust areas meet so that the bust area is going to have a perfect curve. So make sure to notch those points, then pin them together and go ahead and stitch it by half of an inch. Repeat the same thing on your lining piece. Now for the yoke piece, the upper part, what we're going to do, I have 4 pieces of this which I've gone ahead to cut, 2 for each side of the front. So go ahead and place them right side to right side and then stitch where you have the center part of your piece. That's the only part we're going to stitch for now. Now for the back, this is what I have. I also went ahead to add allowances to the parts where it is needed. I didn't add to the zip allowance area because we don't need that. So you're going to have 4 pieces for the back also for the yoke, because you need a piece to serve as your lining piece to turn it over. Now we're going to start stitching the back. So you want to start stitching the back by stitching down your darts firstly. So if you had cut this out as a princess dart cut at the back, you just need to stitch them together. But since we didn't do that, what we need to do firstly is to stitch down the dart. So I'll go ahead, I just went ahead to take the measurement of the length of the dart I had, and I'm going ahead to just replicate it on my fabric. So after doing on one piece, I'll go ahead and repeat to all the 4 pieces of my back, the main piece of fabric, and then the lining pieces. Now for the back pieces for the yoke, you're going to place them right side to right side and then stitch along the zipper areas. Those are the only areas we're going to stitch for this. So just zip along, stitch along the zipper area. So this is what it looks like for the back after stitching. So when you finish stitching, you want to ensure that the yoke, that they are meeting perfectly. And then after stitching the dart for your main piece of fabric for the back, you go ahead and place your yoke on top of it. Just see the way I'm placing mine, and then use your lining to place it together. So you're going to place all 3 together at the upper part and then pin it down. Go ahead and stitch down and then close the zipper area for the main part, that's the down part of the piece. Repeat the same thing to the other part of your back. Sandwich your yoke in between the lining and the main piece of fabric, pin them down and go ahead and stitch it by half of an inch together to keep the piece down. So I'll do that. And then for my front, this is what it looks like after stitching. So you can see that the bust area is looking quite good. You can see the kick that the bust area has. So this is the lining piece of it, and this is what it looks like also. So you can see that this kicks perfectly. Now for the yoke, this is what we have. So before stitching the yoke to the main piece, that's to the fabric piece, we're going to make a little bit of overlap, like stitch them together just a little bit so that it becomes like one piece. So I'm stitching it together by 1 inch. Remember what I added in front was 1.5 for my button allowance. So I've already stitched that ½ inch to close that part. And then I'm using that 1 inch now to now stitch it together to create the illusion of a button. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So I'm going to just place them on top of each other like so and stitch. So please, just 1 inch, just place them together by 1 inch and stitch. When you do that, you notice that when you place them along the neckline of the other piece, which is the down part, it's going to match. So you just go ahead and place them together and stitch it together by 1 inch. Just overlap both of them together by 1 inch right there at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and stitch it first before coming back to attach it to the other piece of the fabric. So I've finished doing that and I'm going to place them. So you can see placing them together this way now, it matches with what I have here. This is what it should be. It should match here. Now we're going to now place this together with our main piece of fabric, sandwiching the yoke in between the main piece of fabric and the lining pieces. You're going to place all of them together, all three together, and then stitch. So get the center piece of your yoke. Also indicate the center of your neckline for the bustier area. Go ahead and place all three together. So I'm just doing that using my chalk to indicate. You can go ahead to use your scissors to make notches on all three pieces, and then you sandwich the yoke in between the lining piece and the main piece of fabric, and go ahead and stitch it down together. So I'm going to place them down this way, all three of them. Use my pins to hold it down before going in to stitch it together by half of an inch. Please, our stitching allowance right now is half of an inch, so go ahead and make use of that stitching allowance to stitch it down so that it comes out looking beautiful. So I finished stitching. This is what the back looks like. So ensure that the yoke areas are matching. That's what's going to give the beauty of the gown. So I stitched it, and I also closed down the sides of my piece. And then the front piece, this is what it looks like after stitching the yoke to it. This is what it looks like from the inside. And I also went ahead to close down the sides together. So this looks nice already. So for the yoke area, we just have to, stitch down that excess extra fabric we have. Iron it down, sorry. So we're going to do that later on. Okay, now what we want to do is to join the back piece to the front piece. So you're going to do this by taking the measurement, getting the excess fabric you have left, and then go ahead and stitch it together. So you can see me taking the measurement around this. You take the measurement around the upper part, which is the bust measurement, and then take the waist measurement. Any excess you have left is what you're going to use. So in this case, what I have left is 3 inches. So I'm going to use 1.5 inches on both sides to stitch it down, and then the next thing I'll do is also stitch down the shoulder areas. So since we have the neckline still open, you want to be careful while you're attaching the shoulder areas together. So just use one piece from either the back or the front, use that to wrap it up and stitch. Now after doing that, the next is to work on the skirt part. So the skirt we're using for this is a handkerchief flea. So I will take you through the process of how to do this. Now, I have a detailed tutorial on how to cut a handkerchief skirt, but because we're using an Ankara fabric for this, we need to get deep into explaining this. So firstly, measure what you have left around the waist area of your upper part so that we can start working. Now, the first thing you need to take note of is the waist. So the round waist we're working with is the round waist you have left on the fabric after stitching the sides together. That's the upper part. That's what we're going to take note of. So the round waist I have here is 37, and then the full length of the fabric you want to work with. So I'm working the gown I'm working with. The full length is 47. My half length is 17 inches in this case, okay, excluding that extra allowance I added. Now for the skirt length, that means what I have left for my skirt length is 30 inches. And then I'm adding 2 inches to this. So if you're hemming, 2 inches will work. If you're turning with a lining, which I did, 1 inch will work extra for you to do that. So we have our waist, which is 37. We have the length, which is 32. Now to get the circumference, we're going to use our waist. So the waist is actually, to get the circumference, waist divided by 2 pi r. So the waist, we're going to divide that by 2 pi r to get the circumference, the radius, sorry, of what we're going to use to cut out the fabric. So 37 divided by 6.248. Sorry, 6.284. That's what we're going to use. I'm using my calculator to get that measurement. So whatever you get, you're going to put it down. So what I got from mine was 5.88. So if you round this up, it's going to give you about 6 inches, but I didn't want that. Or it's going to give you 6 inches, it's going to give you 5.9, depending on how you want that to be. Now, I'm considering the fact that I already went ahead to turn the aspect, that's the zipper area of my upper piece, and I also need to turn the zipper area of my skirt piece so they match and they look beautiful, right? So I decided to use 6 inches at the end of the day, not adding much. Now to get the fabric quantity you're going to cut, you're going to add that waist circumference you got, which is 6. You're going to add that to your length, which is 30. So 36 is what we need. Now we're going to measure 36 into 4 places on the Ankara fabric. Measuring that using the length of your fabric, you're going to measure 36 times 4, and then go ahead and cut out the excess fabric you have. After doing that, go ahead and fold. So I'm just showing you how to do that so that you have this perfect. That means that we're going to have a spot where we need to join on our Ankara piece to now make it the waist to be a circular piece, a full piece. So after doing that, go ahead and place that 6 inches all round. After folding your fabric into 4, go ahead and place 6 inches all round at one point. Okay, so at the point I'm measuring this, I have both ends closed on this Ankara fabric, while the other parts are open, but this part, both sides are closed. But you can see from the edge here, you'll see that it is open, meaning that we're going to have a point where we have to stitch together to give us a whole piece for the skirt. So what I usually do is that after marking my radius, I usually go back with my tape to measure around to ensure that it matches with the initial waist circumference which I'm working with. That's the total waist circumference I'm working with, which is 37 inches. I usually go back and measure it. If it matches, I make use of that. If it's too wide, I'm going to reduce it. I hope you understand that. So now I'm going to adjust the entire length of this Ankara fabric to match with what I want, right? So now this is what it looks like after cutting open. If I'm to separate this, I'm going to have 2 pieces for this waist. So because we need it as a whole piece, what we're going to do is to pick one point, go ahead and stitch it down. After stitching down, the next thing you want to do is to cut it out on your lining piece. Make your lining piece 1 inch or 2 inches shorter than the main piece of fabric, and then go ahead and turn it inside out. So I've done that, and this is what it looks like. I turned it everywhere apart from the waist area, remember. Then we go ahead and stitch it down. So we are going to attach it to the waist by getting the midpoint of the skirt. I already have my joining area that's going to serve as the midpoint of my skirt. The next thing is to get the midpoint of the upper part, that's the half length. You get the midpoint, and then you place them together right side to right side and go over to your machine and stitch it down by half of an inch. So the joining allowance we have here is half of an inch. So you're going to place them together and go ahead and stitch by half inch. So you can see me making that notch there. I would go ahead and place them right side to right side and then move over to my sewing machine to stitch it down. So after stitching, this is what I have. I've stitched it down. I went ahead to close the zipper area, and I've also attached my zip to the wrong side. That's to the back part of it. So that fits perfectly. Now, moving on, the next thing we want to work on is the collar. We're going to move over to fixing our collar to the neckline. So to do that, since we have this separated at the back, we have one part here and we have one part there. It means we're going to be cutting 2 collars for the both sides of the neckline. Now I'm just going ahead to take off the excess zip that I have at the upper part. Now after taking off your zip, please ensure that you don't zip back up so that your zip doesn't pull out, okay? So next what we're going to do is to measure the neckline. So I'm going to measure for both of them to ensure that they correspond, so that when I'm cutting, whatever I'm cutting for one is going to serve for the other 2. All right. So I'll measure for one, and then I'll go back and measure the other one. So you measure from the center back to the center front and repeat the same thing on the other side, center back to the center front, and make sure that they are corresponding on both sides so that you can do that. Now over to getting our collar, I have this piece of paper and my pen. I'm going to use this to draft out the collar. So I'm starting off with a line. This is where I'm going to take my measurement upwards to. So the first thing you want to do is to put down the measurement you got. So this is going to serve as the full measurement because my collar is just a single piece for both of them. So I'm not cutting one piece to attach to everywhere, just a single piece for both of them. So I've gone ahead to mark the starting. So usually we have the collar fall and we have the collar stand, right? So what we're making today for this collar is the collar fall. The collar stand is the lower one, while the collar fall is the upper one. So we're making the collar fall for this piece. So next thing, you want to label your center front and your side. So from the center front, I'm going back again to ensure that the measurement I have here corresponds what I have. Now for my center front, what I will do is to go up from the center front, that's the midpoint. You can go up by 2 inches, 1.5 inches, but I went up by 2 inches right here. And then from the side, what I'm going to use is 3 inches on this other side and just mark it and connect the neckline. Now I'll connect both parts I've marked together. So note that you can make your collar, you can use a collar fall and a collar stand for your piece, okay? That means you can do both of them for your piece if that is what you want. Okay, but I just wanted a collar fall for this client because she doesn't want too much of it. So you can do both of them, use a collar fall and a collar piece. And you can also use a single collar. You can just use a collar that runs through on both sides towards the back if you want to do that. Okay. But I think this works. This is easier for me, and this is actually the pattern I'm following. So I'll just go ahead to mark them together. So this is it. So I'm going to cut out this piece on my fabric, cutting out 4 pieces of fabric, 2 for each side. You can see me labeling this. It's important for you to know the direction your collar is going to, so that when you're stitching on your piece, it's going to come out looking beautiful. So I'll just go in with my scissors to take out the pattern and then go ahead to cut on my fabric. Like I said, if you want to tweak the pattern, whatever type of color you want to make for your piece, it can perfectly work for you. So this is what we're doing for this tutorial. And if you have any other color in mind you want to use, you can do that. So now that I have this done, what I'm going to do is to cut on my fabric. Like I said, I'm going to be cutting out 4 pieces for this, 2 for each side for the collar of this gown. And then I'll be ironing my interface into it. So this is what it looks like. I've actually have this folded into 2, and then I'm folding it again into 2 to make it 4 folds. Now I'm going to place my pattern on top of it and cut it out, so that I'm going to have the pieces. Like I said, I wanted 4 pieces for this. So place it down, use my pins to hold it down, and then just cut out the excess fabric on the sides and take off the excess fabric on the upper part also, and also cut out the sides so that I can separate them into the 4 pieces I want. So since I have this into 4, what I'm going to do is to use one piece to show you and then replicate on the other one. So we're doing the same thing. It's nothing different from each one. So we're doing the same thing for both of the colors. So you're going to take one piece now. Since we have our pattern on this one, what I'm going to do is to just separate this, and then I will start stitching down. So I'm going to take one piece, place my collar on top of it, and then stitch. So you're going to stitch the sides, stitch the upper part, and leave the down part open. That is where the neckline, you're going to be fitting the neckline of your gown into. So you're going to stitch round it, okay, not round it. You're going to stitch this way, okay? This side you're going to stitch from here, and then you're going to stitch the upper part, and then you stitch the other side. So like this, you're going to stitch it down and leave the down part open. Repeat the same thing on the other piece for the collar also. So I finished doing that, and then I marked out 1/2 inch at the bottom area. Wow, because that is the allowance I need to fold in my collar to attach it to the neckline. So you can see me taking this measurement all through this. I'm going to take this through, and then the next thing I'll do is to cut off the excess fabric that I have on it. So we're going to go ahead and cut it off because we'll not be needing this other part. So go ahead and take off the excess. So after doing this with the pattern, you can see that I have my pattern placed here. I'll take off the pattern, place it on the other piece of fabric also, and make the same adjustment to this. Okay, but I already have like stitch lines on the other piece of fabric. I can use that to follow through, or just place my pattern on top of it and repeat the exact process on it. So it's nothing foreign. Then next is to just flip it to the right side, fold in the excess fabric I have at the base, which is the 1/2 inch which I added. I'll fold that in and then give it a good press. So that part is where I'm going to tuck in the neckline of my gown into, to perfect to finish the collar of the gown. So I'm going to repeat that for both pieces of the collar pieces, and then I'll bring it back for us to now attach to the neckline. So you're going to fold this part in by that 1/2 inch and then press it down properly. Make sure you give it a really good press so that it is relaxed. Okay. So this is what it looks like after I finish. Make sure that your collars they are aligning. Make sure that they are perfect. Now we're going to start placing this down. We're going to start attaching, fixing the collar to the piece. Now remember that the part where we have the extension of the collar is is the front area, where it seems as if the collar is bigger, is the front area. And then where we have the collar smaller is the center back. Remember, while we're drafting all that, we took 3 inches for the center front, and then took 2 inches for the side front sorry, for the center back. Okay, so make sure you place that properly while you're placing it on your piece. Go ahead and place them, tuck in your collar, your neckline in between the collar pieces that you have there. Use your pins to hold it down. If you have it longer, go ahead and make adjustments to it so that it fits what you have around the neckline. Use your pins to hold it down, after which you go over to your machine and stitch it down perfectly. Please use a matching thread so that the stitching is going to be perfect. You just go ahead and stitch it down to finish up this piece. So after doing that, this is what it looks like. I went ahead to fix a puff sleeve to this. I've made a lot of puff sleeves on this channel. You should check them out. Now this brings us to the end of the tutorial, and this is what the gown looks like. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're yet to subscribe to the channel, do well to subscribe and ensure to give this video a thumbs up. Do well to like this video, turn on your notification bell so you'll be inspired whenever a new video is posted. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you for watching. Bye.